okay, parents, your kids are going to turn out just fine.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FOCO. That's FOCO, F-O-C-O. If you are a parent of a child or teen with ADHD, you know how challenging it can be to keep them focused and engaged. FOCO is the all-natural solution for ADHD, whether it's for school, homework, or just everyday activities. FOCO helps your child or teen stay calm and attentive. Before trying prescription drugs like Adderall that can come with harsh side effects, I recommend you try FOCO. Visit ThinkFOCO, that's ThinkFOCO, thinkfoco.com for more information. Welcome to the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. I am Dr. Michael Molofsky, board-certified pediatrician, parent of 7, and on the podcast, we're always talking about how parents can navigate the age of information overload, try to focus on what's really important when it comes to making good decisions and parenting decisions for your kids. Hopefully reduce our anxiety around those decisions because we know that your kids are going to be fine. Today, we're going to be talking about a very popular topic in the pediatric space, which is around gut health. And this is where I think traditional allopathic pediatric medicine and more integrative, complementary, holistic pediatric topics need to come together and overlap because the need is great. There is much more clear evidence about how gut health impacts many of the major public health issues affecting children, and that there are things that we can do every day that move the needle and change the outcome. So, what are the two biggest public health issues that are affecting children and will continue to affect children? One is obesity, and the unfortunate truth is that almost 20% of every child in America is considered overweight or obese. And two, and the mental health crisis, especially in our adolescence, continues. So what do both of these topics have to do with the issue of gut health? And how does managing that proactively move the needle on both of these things? So for a long time, we thought that how our brain and our gut communicated was a one-way street through this nerve called the vagus nerve that went down from our central nervous system, spread out and fanned out through our gut that affected gut function. But one of the bigger revelations in gut science and gut health is that is actually a two-way communication, and that our gut has an independent nervous system that is almost the size of the one in our brain and functions completely independently and communicates in a two-way process up and down that vagus nerve, which is the direct sort of interface between our head brain and our gut brain. And what we're learning is where the rubber hits the road, the mediator of what that communication looks like and how it impacts our health is through the gut microbiome, because the healthy array of bacteria that lives in our gut, or in certain cases, an unhealthy array, produces substances and produces mediators that then affect this two-way translation from our head to our gut, which then impacts major parts of our health. And we are just starting to scratch the surface to learn about how that impacts mental health and how that interacts with healthy weight and gut health. Let's talk about first obesity and the weight problem. So it is no mystery to anybody that's been following anything in health news with regards to kids that the obesity problem in America continues to baffle us. We are affected by it in a massive way. And when it comes to children, 1 out of 5 seems to be affected by this. And this has nothing to do with our genetics have not changed. What has changed is the food environment that our kids have been exposed to over the last 2 generations, and how that impacts our gut function and health, and how that subsequently impacts how our brain interacts with our gut, how we then experience feeling full or satiety, how we crave and seek out foods and different types of calories. And there's no question that has been a major player in our trend towards obesity. Now let's talk about mental health. There is also no mystery that the mental health problem in this country is complicated, and it is tied up with the massive shift in our culture, the enmeshment of technology, the changes in how we live and raise our kids in that milieu and how we as parents have tried to respond to it. And all of that has contributed to the erosion of the mental health of our children, especially our middle school and high school children. But what we are learning is that gut function, gut health seems to be a common denominator, at least in part, in how both of these problems express themselves, and seem to be a way that we as parents can intervene. And once again, there's no magic bullet, there's no magic solution for everything, but how we can intervene and start to push the needle back the other direction in both of these areas. So what is the current understanding of how our gut health and gut-brain interaction interface with these two problems? So it really seems to be where our gut microbiome is that array of bacteria that lives inside of us, and what that microbiome consists of and what it's made up of, whether it's trending towards healthy or unhealthy, has a lot to do with things that we can try to intervene on. There are some known things. Exercise impacts a healthy array of our microbiome. 2, consuming foods that have the type of healthy bacteria that seem to produce the positive benefits in terms of producing the substances and things that interact with our brain that improve and help with both of these areas of weight health and mental health. And 3, fiber. And what fiber is when we talk about probiotics and prebiotics, fiber is the prebiotic that promotes an environment that fosters the healthiest possible array of bacteria. And when we lack fiber and have too much sugar and processed food, it pushes the type of bacteria that can live and thrive in that environment away from the healthy into the unhealthy, and which seems to be a contributor to both of these issues. And I think that the integrative and complementary medicine space is way ahead of traditional pediatrics when it comes to recognizing the magnitude of the impact here and talking about it and advising families and pushing families that, hey, this is something that has very little downside, but if we aggressively manage, can move the needle in both directions. So let's start with the obesity problem and weight. Too much sugar, too much ultra-processed foods, not enough fiber, and not enough movement, creates an environment that is favorable to more unhealthy balance of gut bacteria. Those gut bacteria then change how our brain and our gut communicate with regards to feeling full, with regards to the type of calories that we eat, with regards to how much calories we seek. And there's no question that there is a component, that is a contributing factor, not the only factor, but one of them, when it comes to our overall issue with weight in kids. So it is absolutely clear that avoiding ultra-processed foods and avoiding added sugars and focusing heavily on a daily high-level intake of plant-based fiber generally, that fosters an environment that is more favorable to the type of healthy gut bacteria that we want and need, that changes how our brain and our gut interact around these areas. There are 2 types so fiber is, I think all of us know where to get fiber. About 20 grams to 30 grams a day is considered a healthy amount. However, as someone who has tried to focus on it themselves, that is a lot harder to do, just eating the food, than I had anticipated. Whole fresh fruits and vegetables tend to have a more modest amount of fiber than you think. The most high-level vegetable-based fibers are cruciferous vegetables. That's cauliflower, asparagus, broccoli. A really potent source of healthy fiber is beans. But those are things that are, in our traditional Western diet, are not really very palatable to a lot of kids. So it takes a lot of effort and work to try to get there. This is where supplementing fiber can be a help, either in powder form or gummy form. At least half of that amount has supplements, and then trying to then offer the rest as diet and doing that consistently can really, really move the needle on maintaining healthy weight, in addition to, once again, movement, emphasize on movement, limited processed foods, and less sugar. And then that creates an environment. It's like the healthy soil that these healthy bacteria want to live in and thrive in. So what are the food? What are the other foods that promote the probiotic part? Meaning, we talked about the sources of fiber, but how do we populate our gut and help to populate our gut with the types of healthy bacteria that we're looking for when it comes to both of these issues, mental health and weight? And for sure, there's these shelf-stable powders that we're all familiar with, and they come in multiple brands. However, in every major controlled study, there doesn't seem to be a lot of good objective evidence that they have a lasting impact, that they have a lasting impact on creating the gut population that we're looking for. But it's very hard to prove, it's hard to test. However, there does seem to be in the integrative complementary space clear evidence that consuming the right foods that have the rich probiotic mix that we know to be healthy, putting that in an environment that's ready to nurture it and support it with enough fiber does really work and works better. What are those foods? We always talk about fermented foods. Once again, not the most popular with kids in our society in the Western diet. Sauerkraut, pickles, fermented cabbage, kimchi, things like that are hard. However, there is a fair amount of evidence that dairy-based healthy probiotics do have a really high positive impact, and they're much better tolerated and much more palatable to kids. So those are yogurt, but even more potent than yogurt is kefir, Kefir. Kefir is a fermented whole milk product, which really seems to strike the balance with a very close to ideal type of probiotic balance that when introduced into an environment that is favorable, has a long-lasting impact. So if your child is not dairy sensitive, there's one widely available food that comes in lots of different flavors and forms. Kefir really seems to be one way to really move the needle here. And so now let's talk about the mental health side. So just like in weight management and obesity, we've seen a mounting body of evidence, once again, much more present and vocal in the integrative and complementary medicine space, having to do with the impact of your gut health and a favorable gut environment on symptoms of mental health issues, especially depression and anxiety. In fact, some recent literature came out showing that consistent high levels of fiber intake, and we think because of that, a consistently well-balanced gut microbiome is directly correlated with decreased symptoms of anxiety and depression when controlled for every other factor, including medication. So it has been no mystery, though, that the gut microbiome affects our mental and emotional well-being with the same mechanism and in the same pathways, in the same dual brain model that it affects weight and obesity. So, and the best part about both of these things is that there's no real downside to any of this. Giving our children healthy eater diets, focusing on decreasing ultra-processed foods and sugar, increased movement, daily healthy amounts of fiber and probiotic-containing foods doesn't really have a negative. There isn't really a negative side effect for most people, and yet seems to be a significant part of the puzzle of helping us move the needle towards better mental health and better metabolic health. So I hope this helps. Remember, find us on all podcast platforms. YourKidsWillBeFine.com is the website where you can download all the episodes and shows and leave us comments and suggestions for future shows. Available on every podcast platform where you get your podcasts. Look forward to talking to you next time.